Të nderuar shikues, mirë mbrëma. Myshafirin tim të sotëm, se kam pasur asnjëherë në këtë studio, por unë kam qenë mysafir i tij. Mysafir i detyruar të përgjigjes ftesës së Nikoqirit. Dikur ai më pati marrë në pyetje për 2 ditë, por sonte karrikat janë ndruar. Sonte do ta pyes unë atë për 1 orë e gjysmë, për gjykatën speciale dhe jo vetëm për të. Geoffrey Nice, prokuror në tribunalin e Hagës, dikur ai i cili ka udhëhequr të gjithë tribunalin kundër Miloševićit, është në zonën e Debatit. Është kënaqësia ime posaçme që ta takoj pas kaq shumë vitesh, por është nder që ta kem në studio. Dhe pyetja ime e parë për Geoffreyn është se di, atë kam ndihmuar diç në dëshminë time kundër Slobodan Miloševićit dhe të tjerëve, por e di që jam i nderuar që je sonte këtu.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And you and several other witnesses from Kosovo, coming at the same time, put the cap on, finished the political case against Milošević concerning Kosovo. And so, yes, you certainly gave us a lot of help.
Thanks, Geoffrey. Geoffrey, sonte jemi këtu të flasim për një tjetër gjykat, kësaj radhe të bërë inkas për një popull, pra përgjykuar njërin anë të rrëfimit. Me anën tjetër duket se u lan duart, fjalën e kam për serbët. Zotri Nice, çfarë janë dhomat e specializuara dhe zyra prokurorit specializuar? A paraqesin ato nivel të mbivendosur në drejtësinë kosovare? Dhe me çfarë baze faktike arsyetohet formimi i tyre?
And there's quite a big question. The short answer is that the court, although said to be part of the Kosovo legal system, technically part of the Kosovo legal system, was imposed by political force on your system, is run entirely by non-Kosovars, and is rooted, finds its origin in something called the Marty Report, a report by a Swiss senator called Dick Marty into allegations of organ harvesting, forced organ harvesting from Serbs who, it was said, were shot to order in order for the purpose of extracting their organs. I'm not hearing anything through here at the moment.
You don't need to hear, just...
No, it's fine. So that's the outline of the court. The steps between, well, first of all, there are significant steps in the origins of this story before the Marty Report, and then there are significant steps between the Marty Report and the coming into force of the court itself. I'll deal with the second part because I think that's most relevant, and maybe our discussion will go back to the first part later. Marty's report was seen by very many people at the time as a hollow or empty document, and a document that reflected almost certainly a bleak political pressure.
Megjithatë, po kthehem te një pyetje konkrete. Dokumenti i Dick Martit e ka ndërtuar një gjykat kundër një populli. Juridikisht, si shpjegohet kjo dhe pse ka ndodhur kjo?
I certainly don't justify it because I'm not sure that it can be justified. The coming into being of this court was the result of political force, political will by outsiders to Kosovo, in particular the Council of Europe, America, and the European Union, who for some reasons wanted this court imposed on you, and you and your government ultimately had no choice but to succumb.
Një pyetje konkrete, ju për vite tëra keni qenë prokuror në tribunal. Pse rastet e krimeve nuk kanë përfunduar me atë tribunal, për arsye se ai tribunal ka qenë i formuar për rastet e krimeve të luftës në Jugosllavi? Pse nuk kanë përfunduar këto raste dhe pse po na ripërsëriten me një gjykatë speciale?
I cannot answer that question because that's a question that only Mrs. Del Ponte, the chief prosecutor at the material time, could answer, or those political forces unknown and unseen, unknown to and unseen by me, could answer. It is true that as a result of absolute determination in the so-called negotiations about the law of this court, the period of consideration was extended from the middle of 1999 to the end of 2000, and that period may have been problematic for prosecutions at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. But for the rest of the first part of the period, there is no reason why these matters should not and could not have been investigated and dealt with at the tribunal.
Megjithatë, kur është kriju gjykata speciale, ka pas një përshtypje që puna e prokurorëve në tribunal nuk ka qenë e mjaftueshme, prandaj disa lëndje në bartë në gjykatën që është krijuar me vonë, këtë gjykatën speciale. A është e vërtetë kjo?
That may have been the impression given, but it could be said of any of the warring parties from the former Yugoslavia that the prosecutions were incomplete. The tribunal did not pretend to be able, the Yugoslav tribunal did not pretend to be able to try everything. So why was Kosovo picked out specially for a special tribunal? Why not Serbia? Why not maybe Bosnia? The answer is that there were unseen forces, unseen by me, that were determined to impose this tribunal on your country and to allow allegations to be pursued at that tribunal against members of the Kosovo Liberation Army, and in particular against your leaders.
E di që ke qenë interesuar, involvuar thellë në problemet e Jugosllavisë, gjykimit tyre, gjykimit e kriminalëve të luftës. Por një gjë desha ta sqaroj me ju, zoti Najs, ka të bëjë me reagimin tuaj pas formimit e gjykatës speciale. Si profesionist që jeni, si njeri që keni marrë pjesë në gjykime, në gjykatën e tribunalit. Ju tha që kjo gjykatë është politike, ose me premisa politike. Më thuani, pse realisht gjykata speciale është e drejtuar kundër një populli ose kundër një lufte, për arsye politike, për arsye të largimit të njerëzve nga politika, flasim për udhëheqët e UÇK-s, për arsye se EULEX-i dhe Evropa kanë harxuar aq shumë pare dhe nuk i kanë kryer si duhet punën, ma gjej një arsye që mund të krijohet një gjykatë pas 20 vitesh për këta njerëz.
I think it could be either of the reasons you give, but because I'm not a politician and because I haven't seen at first hand the application of political pressure, I can't be certain. From an outsider's point of view, it has always looked to me as though this court, amongst other objectives, oblique objectives, have served the objective of ensuring that Kosovo remains under external control. Because as long as your leaders are stained by unproven allegations and may, for all I know, be concerned that they may be pursued in respect of those allegations, that gives very great power to any international body that has influence on this tribunal. But I can go no further than guess, because I am a mere lawyer and I'm not a politician.
Mirë, atëherë, edhe pse kjo që do bëj tash, ose pyetjen që do bëj, ka të bëj pak me politikë, por edhe me fakt. Në vitin 2001, zonja Kalla del Ponte është takuar me Gjingjić. Një prej, thuhet, se një prej pikave kryesore të diskutimit që ka kërkuar zoti Gjingjić është që të krijohen, ose që Serbia të ndihmojë me dokumente tribunalin për 6 zonat e luftës së Kosovës. Dhe në një farë mënyre është gjetë një kompromis për të dënuar njerëzit e 6 zonave të luftës në Kosovë. Dhe sikur kjo ka ndodhur me përpikmëri. Më thuan zori Najs, dini gjë për këtë takim dhe keni informacion apo keni qenë vetë në takim me zonin Kalla del Ponte?
I was certainly not present at the meeting, and I know nothing of the meeting, and I was only present at one meeting that involved Mrs. Del Ponte and Gjingjić. However, it was quite clear to those of us in the tribunal that she was apparently responding to pressures that could only have served Serb interests, as well as the interests of justice, maybe, to have leading Kosovars tried at the tribunal. And so, and this is an example of what was clear to us, at the end of 2004, she determined to indict Ramush Haradinaj. And 2 teams of her own lawyers told her there was insufficient evidence and they would not draft an indictment. So she instructed 3 lawyers who were not courtroom lawyers, who did not have either the skills or the courage to go into court. She instructed them to draft an indictment. And those of us in the office saw these 3 men, or at least 2 of them, becoming very worried at the possible consequences, as we judged it, of an indictment coming public and maybe leading to Kosovo going up in flames. They were lucky, because Ramush Haradinaj, once he knew of the indictment, said immediately, "Do nothing, I shall go to The Hague." But this was a reflection of her determination to bring indictments against Kosovo Albanian leaders. And it worried us so much that 2 of us, 2 senior lawyers, told her she should not be doing this sort of thing, that she should do as the previous prosecutor, Louise Arbour, had done, put questions of who to indict out for peer review in the office as a whole. And it will come as no surprise to you to know that from that moment on, but there were also other reasons why she took the same view. Mrs. Del Ponte did not like my approach to justice, which did not accord to hers. There's one other thing, if I can deal with it now, because it's the same topic. And can we go back to the Marty report? And I said there was that first period of time, which is important before you get to the Marty report. And we now know, we certainly didn't know at the time, that in 2003, there had been an investigation in the tribunal into the rumors of organ harvesting, forced organ harvesting, by Kosovo Albanians of Serbs shot to order. At that time, the investigation was heavily focused on Ramush Haradinaj, the then Prime Minister, and his brother Daut. As it happens, that investigation led nowhere, and those dealing with the investigation and also those dealing with the associated forensic scientific investigation said there is nothing here to investigate. But after she left the tribunal, and when Hashim Thaçi was Prime Minister, she raised the same allegations again in her book, for whatever purpose, I can't say. But now, and without explanation, the focus was against Hashim Thaçi. And if you put these two things together, you can certainly see, once when in office and once when out of office, a strong wish by Mrs. Del Ponte to see Kosovo Albanian leaders prosecuted. Now, it's the view of some, and I'm one of them, that Serbia has been much cleverer with the tribunal than any of the other component parts of the former Yugoslavia in the way it's dealt with evidence and in its publicity generally. It has shown from the beginning a desire to equalize culpability, where equalization of culpability may be wholly inappropriate. If we are right in that, if I'm right in that, and others like me who think the same thing, these determined efforts to indict Ramush Haradinaj with insufficient evidence, and then to turn the focus on the new Prime Minister, may show how successful Serbia was even then in a campaign to equalize where equalization was not appropriate.
Shumë interesant kjo, edhe si ndoshta kjo është një perspektivë politike e një juristi. Desha t'ju pyes konkretisht, nuk e di ju a e dini se një raport i Dick Martit thuhet se është ndërtuar së bashku me ambasadorin e Serbisë në Zvicër. Ai në një intervistë doli publikisht dhe i tha se ne, zoti Dick Marti, ja kemi prodhuar të gjithë dokumentat për rastin. Kjo ka ndodhur para 3 javësh. Por, në vitin 1993, ka pas një dokument të ngjajshëm, me narracion të ngjajshëm, për një pjesë të krahinës, siç e quanin atje, ku ka jetuar në serbët në Kroaci. Dhe gjithashtu flitej për trafikim të organe. Dhe kjo gjuhë e vitit 1993 është bartur tash edhe me rastin e zotit Haradinaj, edhe me rastin e zotit Hashim Thaçi dhe të tjerëve. Dhe po e shiku të dokument që mund të gjeni, është narracion, ose është rrëfim i ngjajshëm. Është rrëfim me shpifje që nuk ka asnjë fakt brenda. E dini ju për këtë?
Oh yes, I'm certainly aware of it, and I've always advised those who have sought my advice that you should have in mind that allegations of organ harvesting are one of the standard weapons of war, and indeed that the Serbs had made allegations in order, first the Croats, and then the Bosnians, and then finally the Kosovars, so that any person in receipt of rumor or allegations or suspicions of organ harvesting, while of course those allegations have to be taken seriously and investigated, should always have at the back of his mind, or maybe at the middle of his mind, but this is the sort of thing that is so often raised as a weapon of war. I'm not sure that level of caution was ever given by Marty or when he prepared his report, or any of those who've reviewed it since, who have been inclined to rule against Kosovo. But yes, it's a very important fact to have in mind, in my view. And we may not have time to go into this, I'm not sure, but Marty's report, well, both before Marty's report, when these allegations were aired on television, and after it, all the surrounding personnel, journalists, people like Florence Hartman, who was Mrs. Del Ponte's press spokesman, the chief investigator of the 2003 original investigation, all say, Bernard Kouchner, they all say nothing in these allegations. It's only the Marty report which stands, if it stands at all.
Megjithatë, Marty report, ose raporti I Martit, po I dërgon mbi 200 njerëz në gjykatën speciale. Ky është fakt. Po raporti I Martit nuk ka asnjë fakt brenda. Ose ka rrefim, sikur të ishte një libër imagjinar për luftën. Pyetja ime është konkrete, edhe sikur një pjesë të ishte e vërtet për shtëpinë e verdhë. Si është e mundun që gjykata vendos që të flitet për shtëpinë e verdhë, kur nuk është jurisdikcioni I saj. Këto vetëm ma thuj si jurist, se ajo është realisht gjykata speciale është e Kosovës, shtëpia e verdhë është në Shqipëri. Si jurist, si mund të bëjnë gabime kaq të lehta edhe kaq domethënëse një gjykatë e cila pretendon se është profesional?
Quite a lot of points here, so let me deal with them in order. First of all, the Yellow House as the alleged place where these gruesome operations were carried out was referred to in the 2003 investigation. The investigation that, as I said earlier, was the subject of a negative conclusion, both by the investigators and also by the forensic scientists. By the time of Marty's report, the Yellow House had been acquitted of being the center of the operations and was said to have been a way station, a station en route to the place where the operations were carried out. The second question, or maybe the third that you raised, is how can what happened in Albania, if it happened at all, be subject to jurisdiction? And the answer is that the law imposed on you by the European Union, in effect, in the so-called negotiations about the law, allows jurisdiction for crimes that were commenced within Kosovo. So, for example, and entirely in theory, if somebody was arrested or detained in Kosovo and then taken across the border to another country and then killed in order that you could split him open and take out his organs, then jurisdiction is given by that law. It's very, very important, I think, to understand something that is technical in a sense, but not so complicated. This special law has to deal with its jurisdiction, the scope of crimes it can try. And as I've just explained, one of the limiting factors is that any crime has to at least start in Kosovo. But the most important restriction is that any crime charged has to be what, let us call, a Marty crime, a crime in the Marty report. The law uses two different English terms. One is related to, and one is reported, neither of those terms being further defined. But let's assume those terms will be capable of meaning something to the judges. What in the Marty report is either reported or related to, given, as you correctly summarize in my view, that the report is pretty well without evidence. Reading the report at its most generous from the point of view of the prosecuting authority, you could say that there is some evidence where Marty says there is evidence from people of this, that, or the other thing, but very little. And you'd have to accept that a report is valuable for these purposes, for jurisdiction purposes, even where it identifies the witnesses in no way at all. Not only does it not say the witness Mr. XY, it doesn't say a witness who was a KLA commander or whatever else. It says nothing. But even if you assume that some of the material is capable of being called evidence, what do you find? That there is no evidence of organ harvesting against anyone.
Kjo pjesë e rrëfimit tuaj tash po më duket pak e dhimbshme. E dhimbshme për ne këtu në Kosovë, për një arsye. Si mund ndërtohet një gjykatë speciale me rrëfim pa evidencë për krimin? Megjithatë është një rrëfim që e lëndon secilin kosovar që ka luftu për liri, që ka pas një durim patësor për liri, dhe tash gjykohemi në emën të një rrëfimi të dikmartit. Kjo është pak dhimbje. Realisht është dhimbje që në një farë mënyre, nëse mund të them se shqiptarët e Kosovës, zotinajs, mendojnë se kjo gjykatë po mundohet ta rishkruaj historinë. Kanë apo s'kan drejt shqiptarët realisht?
The short answer to the last sentence of your question is that it may be that the court is serving the purpose of rewriting history. The longer answer includes the following, maybe material to your viewers. I got to know through my work quite a bit about at least 4 of the component parts of the former Yugoslavia. But that doesn't make me loyal to any particular part. I'm not a want to be Kosovar, not a want to be Bosnian. I'm just an outside lawyer who unfortunately doesn't speak the language, so has those limitations, and who just sees what he sees. My first encounter with the organ harvesting allegations was not somebody from Kosovo writing to me. It was being asked to write an article in a London literary magazine about the Marty report. And so I read up about the Marty report. At the same time, there were allegations being released in the Serbian press about a completely fictional witness called K144. And I wrote my review, which was critical of the report and critical of the underlying allegations. And so I came to the whole process from a position of neutrality. Obviously, I've become engaged since in working with people here in Kosovo, but my starting point was as a neutral observer. I thought, what's wrong with this? And my view, namely to ask the question, what's wrong with this, hasn't changed at all by all the material that has slowly and slowly surfaced. In the course of reading all that material as an external lawyer and having no special loyalty, it has occurred to me that the report is deeply damaging to the reputation of your country and its citizens, as well as its leaders, because it stains them with an easily made allegation that sticks in the memory of those who hear it and may never be removed. And you know, it has occurred to me, just as an external observer, that the time may have come for the prosecutor at this court, Mr. Smith, an American, to recognize the damage that is done to you and your people, by leaving the suggestion of organ harvesting crimes having been committed, and come clean and say, actually, we have no such evidence and no one will be charged with offences. I might be wrong. He might have got evidence and there might be forthcoming trials of political leaders up to their elbows in cutting out organs from Serbs. But there's been no indication of such evidence to date. The man Clint Williamson, who conducted the investigation following on, more or less said no evidence. We've heard recently of people being summoned to The Hague as suspects and interviewed here, I think, as suspects. And so far as I know, I may be wrong, I only know what I read and what is told to me, none of them has had an allegation of organ harvesting raised with them. And surely, if you're a responsible prosecutor, knowing that your office not only has the duty of charging individuals, but of setting out some kind of legal narrative, if you know that a damaging narrative is empty, maybe you should do something about it.
Po, ekziston edhe një pikë tjetër, e cila është gjithashtu e rëndë e dhimbshme, që gjykata speciale ka shpeshere krahasohen me Nürnbergun. Ç'lidhje ka Nürnbergu me gjykatën speciale? Megjithatë, ky popull ka luftuar për liri dhe mbi lirinë ka mund ndodhin edhe gabim, ka mund ndodhë edhe një krim, por jo të ndërtohet gjykatë speciale. Dhe zotin Ajs, ju jeni një prej juristëve të njohur, të famshëm, keni po themi një prapavi të edukimit tillë që edhe profesional, edhe tjera, intelektual, që din se çfarë është Nürnbergu dhe çfarë është gjykata speciale. Si mund të krahasohen këto dy gjykata? Dhe pse, çfarë krahasimi në narracion mund të kenë këto dy gjykata që janë të pakrahasueshme realisht?
There is a single, for me, point about the Nuremberg court and this court that I've reflected on right from the beginning. However right or wrong the results of the Nuremberg trials may have been, they have been criticized as being what's called victor's justice. You try just one side of a conflict, and of course as a result of that, the Allies were never investigated or tried for the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or the carpet bombing of Dresden, or whatever else. And from that moment on, as academics who had considered whether you could have other international criminal trials to deal with issues of crime in conflict, they've rejected the idea of having a one-sided court. So that all courts, in theory, that have come into being, Yugoslavia Tribunal, Rwanda Tribunal, although that was problematic, and all the others, have worked on the basis you look in the round at any criminality that might be revealed in your investigations and you prosecute all sides. Here you have got, because it's based on the Marti report, which is only focused on Kosovo Albanians, you've got a court that is focused on one particular ethnic group and nationality only. And that seems to me quite extraordinary. What do you think would happen in the way of outrage if you did the same thing with any other Western country, or indeed with other parts of the former Yugoslavia? Quite unaccountable and inexcusable. I must make this point at some stage of your program, and I'll make it now. the criticisms that I'm making of the court and its history are criticisms I would make in court in applications, if I ever had to make them, about the jurisdiction of the court. And they don't show my disrespect for the court itself or for its staff or for its judges. Once you participate in a court, if you recognize the court, and of course I do, then you have to respect it as a functioning court. And so it's not to be thought that I'm not respectful of the court or recognizing it. And what I'm telling you now, all of it, may well turn up at the hands of your own lawyers, I suspect, who are doing terribly well at the moment at the court, very well in the success they've been having. It'll turn up in arguments they will make about jurisdiction. That for sure will be made at the court.
Du për njerëzit në Kosovë t'i sqaroj disa gjëra. Tribunali i Hagës, prokurorët e UNMIK-ut dhe ULEX-it, se bashku me prokurorët vendor, janë marrë me krimet e luftës në Kosovë. A të shtuan gjithë ata në këtë punë, apo pse duhej një sistem tjetër, çfarë është gjykata speciale, i ndan nga gjithçka, ti trajtoj krimet e luftës në Kosovë. Dhe pyetja është pse duhet bërë jashtë Kosovës, tek e fundit. Dhe kjo është ndoshta pika që njerëzit donë në Kosovë ta dinë. Çfarë mendoni ju, zoti Nice, për këtë?
Well, the assertion is made that ULEX failed in its mandate for various reasons. I'm not sufficiently acquainted with the detail of ULEX's operations to express an opinion on that. But the fact is that this was a court in operation, and if there were shortcomings in it, those shortcomings could be improved, and these matters could all have been tried there. There are those who raise different arguments as to why this special court was needed. They're not arguments that I've considered in the greatest of detail, but I find them interesting. And one is that by taking a court both within, but then taking it outside Kosovo, meant that the culpability of international actors could never be considered, whereas in the ULEX system, maybe they could have been. But those are not arguments of mine. They're arguments of others. Your own Professor Robert Moharimi, for example, can deal with that if you find it interesting. Going back to the original part of your question, ULEX could have dealt with this, and it's arguably inexplicable why, if it needed improvement, it wasn't improved and used to deal with these crimes.
Mirë, edhe një çështje lidhur me këtë. Nëse tribunali e ka kryer një proces të gjykimit, nëse UNMIK-u ka dështuar, nëse ULEX-i ka dështuar, nëse gjykatat lokale nuk kanë arritur, pse mendoni që kjo gjykatë speciale mund të arrijë diçka ndryshe, edhe spektakulare ndryshe nga kjo hierarki e gjykimeve të deri tashme?
I don't know whether it can. I don't have a view one way or the other on its capacity because we haven't seen it at work yet, save in the most limited, save to the most limited extent. And I think on that question it's wait and see.
Wait and see. Dhe nëse po thu wait and see, cila është përshtypja e juaj e parë? Ju ishit në gjykatën, në zyrat e gjykatës speciale, e patit një rast. Sa ndëgjuam, ju i keni preferuar, ose i keni thënë klientit tuaj, Samil Ushtakut, as një fjalë mos e fol. Nuk duhet as një përgjigje. Pse?
I certainly didn't tell him not to. I gave him advice and he considered my advice and acted upon it. I apparently have his authority to reveal what would otherwise be confidential to him. And I can simply say the following, that Mr. Lishtaku, maybe like others who've been summoned, was summoned to do two things. To bring documents. Well, he had no documents, so that issue, although we made no concessions about it, that issue fell away in his case, and then to answer questions. And the summons said no more than that. And so a very reasonable inquiry to make of the prosecuting policeman or investigator and the lawyer who was sitting with him from the office of the prosecutor was, what is your allegation against Mr. Lushtaku? Because unless we know what the allegation is, we can't really move forward. And they fumbled. They had no allegation to make. And indeed, they said in terms to Mr. Lushtaku, we have no specific allegation to make against you. I said, well, that's really not very satisfactory. You don't arrest a man. Let's move away from the fact that you don't arrest a man here in Pristina whom you suspect of stealing a motor car and just say, come in here, I'm going to ask you some questions. You say you're suspected of stealing a motor car. That's what you're likely to say, certainly what happens in England. And I want to ask you some questions. Then the man knows, OK, I'm dealing with this allegation, I can answer questions. So we said to the prosecutor, well, that won't do at all. You can't expect a man to answer questions when you have no allegations to put to him. And eventually they fumbled to the back of their pile of prepared questions, and they read out a little summary of what they were clearly intending to say to him at the end of the interview, which was something along the lines of, we suspect you of having committed offences about detention camps. So I said, well, it's not enough, but that's what you're saying. I said, so the next thing is, given that your jurisdiction is rooted, has to be rooted in the Marty report, can you point me to the bit of the Marty report that supports this as a Marty crime? And there was a bit of a silence. So I said, well, I think the best thing to do, to be fair to you, is that we all take an hour off and we'll go to separate rooms, and I will reread the Marty report line by line to see if I can find the jurisdiction that you're unable to find. So we went away, and I came back and I said, I'm awfully sorry, but I can't find your jurisdiction, can you? And they were silent. So I said, I then gave advice to Mr. Lushtaku, and in the event, he answered no questions.
Interesant kjo, por unë po e kujtoj kohën kur ju na keni thirrur për të dëshmuar atje. Ne të gjithë me herët e kemi ditur se cila është landa jonë, i kemi pas para vetës shumicën e gjërave. Si është e mundur që një gjykat që ka pas 20 vitesh me evidencat e presupozuara, të njëjta nuk pas ka evidenca të reja. Këtë nuk e kuptoj. Për arsye se rastet janë të njëjta, kurse ne në gjykatën, në tribunalin, atëherë e kemi pas letër, çfarë do të flitet, çfarë do të jenë afërsisht gjërat, vetëm pyetësorin afërsisht nuk e kemi pasur. Si është e mundur që kjo gjykat nuk i ka gjërat e tilla?
I don't know. I mean, you, of course, were in a different position because you were a witness,
yeah,
and you were summoned to help as a witness, and there was never any question of your being other than a witness. Here, people are being summoned as suspects, so it's a slightly different position. And it's true that when pressed, the policeman in the interview with Mr. Lushtaku eventually said, well, these are the subject headings that I would like to ask him about. He was clearly hoping that this would tempt Mr. Lushtaku to answer questions. But the subject headings weren't in any sense allegations, they weren't specific. They didn't say anything about him, so they didn't add anything. And I'm afraid that there must be the possibility that the summonses to witnesses as suspects to answer questions is, or maybe, serving the prosecutor's purpose of gathering evidence. But as you correctly remind us, gathering evidence as a witness is a totally different exercise from putting an allegation to a suspect. And you shouldn't use the second to achieve the first.
Mirë, po ndalim edhe të një pikë raportit dikmarit, edhe lidhja me një krimit organizuar me një klinik që quhej Medicus. Sikur ishte në një farë mënyrë paragjykuese se nëse ka ndodhur një krim në shtëpi të verdh, ajo ka një referencë Medicus që është formuar pas luftës. Si është e mundur që dikush shkruaj gjëra të tilla që as në romanet të cilat janë këtë imagjinare nuk mund bëhen krahasime, nuk preken ato mes veti. Si mund të jetë dikush kaq diletant në një rrëfim që dhe ta pranoj një gjykat një rrëfim tillë. Kjo më duket pak, prandaj më duket politike, prandaj më duket thjesht e paragjykuar për dënuar dikë.
The attempted connection of the allegations of organ harvesting to the Medicus investigation leap from the page as an improper connection, wholly unjustified and unsupported by anything except a bald assertion by Marty that they have reason to believe that top figures, I think that means top political figures in respect of one, were also top figures in respect of the other. Completely unsupported by evidence, and an assertion that seeks to bridge what is in reality an unbridgeable gap. The Marty report is difficult to read because it is such a jumble of things that you need to read it several times, and you need to read it, line by line and work out what he's saying. He doesn't use the word evidence very often. He uses something called indication. Is an indication a rumor? I'm not sure. He speaks English perfectly well, so why does he use a word indication and not evidence? All that sort of thing. But there are some things that leap from the page and you can't miss them. And the false connection between Medicus and the organ harvesting allegations is one. Another thing, by the way, that's very interesting is that Marty himself, in his report, says this is not an investigator's report.
Yeah.
And so you've got the rather peculiar position of a court relying on a report that is not an investigator's report. Very odd.
Ai ka thënë në raport se këtë kanë bërë palët e treta, edhe unë mbi palët e treta e kanë ndërtuar rrëfimin. Kështu është ai deklaron në raportin e tij, që palët e treta e kanë informuar. Por desha që pyes edhe një gjë. Në vendimet e tribunalit thuhet se UÇK-ja ka qenë një formacion i pa organizuar. Dhe këtë konstatim e ka edhe Dick Marty. Por, është diçka jo logjike konstatimi tjetër afër, si thot, formacionet ushtarake të UÇK-s kanë qenë pa organizuar, por krimi ka qenë i organizuar. Ma thuaj, si shkojnë këto dyja bashkë? Ky formacion ka bërë krim të organizuar. Dy gjëra që logjikisht nuk do të duhet të rrinin në një tekst.
All I can do is shake my head. I have no idea. You must ask Mr. Marty that. But it is interesting that Marty has never, I think, been put in a position of having to answer questions about his report. I once drafted, I don't know how many pages of questions that could be put to him, line by line, which would establish what he's saying, because his report raises so many questions, of which the last one that you've raised is just one. It is worth recalling that his report, upon which the present specialist chamber is dependent, was the subject of concern, not by the Council of Europe, which commissioned it, a totally separate body, but by members of the European Parliament, who were very concerned about this report because they saw no evidence, or they saw very little evidence, if any. And they had Marty in, and they asked him questions about it. And the questioning did not go well, or end satisfactorily. It's a little reported encounter. You can find reports of it in the Irish Times, but otherwise he's never been answered and never been questioned. And I wonder if the prosecutor of the Specialist Chamber has any intention of calling Mr. Marty as a witness in any of the cases that he may in due course bring before the court but by indictment. If he were to do so, I think it's inevitable that any lawyer, just as indeed a journalist or an educated member of the public, would have what I think is called in English a field day in asking questions about a report that is not what it appears to be.
Desha diçka që mu po më konsideroj si të rëndësishme për të sqaruar, zotin Najs, por edhe për këtë gjykat që është formuar. Raporti thot në një pjesë se shumica ushtarëve të UÇK-s kanë qenë të gatshëm të vdisnin për ta çliruar Kosovën. Nuk do të thotë se ishte kështu dhe se shumica ishin të tillë, thot. Me këtë sentencë, ai në një farë mënyre thotë se gjithë ushtarët e UÇK-s ishin të gatshëm të vdisnin për liri, por nuk do të thotë se një pjesë e tyre nuk kishin. Si mund të ndërtohet një narracion juridik me këtë fjali? Si mund ndërtohet një gjykat me këtë fjali?
You can't.
You can't.
And I think we've talked a lot about the Marty report, and it could always be that he's simply not very good at writing a report, and one must always allow for that. And so with that in mind, you say, had the document he produced been what it should have been, what would it have been like? And the answer is it would have said either we have evidence from Mr. XY of this, that, and the other thing, or even we have evidence from a witness whose identity cannot be disclosed for reasons of security that this, and this happened. We have evidence from Mr. ABC that this happened. We have evidence from Miss Z that this happened. And that is what the report should contain. And if that was what it did contain, then it would be much easier for lawyers confronting summonses at the moment, which is all that they are confronting, and individuals confronting summonses, and then later for people at trial to confront indictments. It would be easier for them to deal with the question of jurisdiction. But apart from the fact that there's almost none of those crisp sentences that you would expect, it's interspersed in any event with narrative and polemic and material hostile to your country, your clan culture, which is rubbished as essentially criminal in its origin, all that sort of thing. And so it's very difficult to pick it out. But the answer is your original question.
Tri pyetje të fundit kam, dy do të jenë shumë personale, që ndoshta do e kesh vështirë përgjigjen, po njëra prej këtyre është misioni e ULEX-it ka harxuar diku rreth 600 milion, 500 milion euro. Dhe është misioni më i shtrenjtë i Bashkimit Evropian në një vend evropian. Për faktin se konsiderohet se ka dështuar edhe në koncept, edhe në pjesën e vetë juridike, ose edhe të gjykatave, Bashkimi Evropian ka gjetë një arsye shtesë që përmes dikmarrjet ose këtij raporti ta kthej autoritetin duke ndërtuar gjykatën speciale. E di që s'ka evidencë, është një interpretim. A mendoni se mund të jetë i saktë ky interpretim që në një farë mënyrë të shpëtohet fytyra e një fuqie me pafuqinë e këtij vendi?
I don't know, of course, as I said right at the beginning, what are the political objectives that underlie the forced creation of this court. And therefore, I can neither agree nor disagree with your proposition that this court is trying to save a reputation that failed, if I understand your question correctly, through ULEX. But I think it's also pretty important for everyone to understand how decision makers, diplomats, politicians, civil servants change very rapidly. You discover this whenever you talk to diplomats, English diplomats, for example, who are concerned with the former Yugoslavia or concerned with this court. And you suddenly find that they've only been at that desk in the Foreign Office for 2 years and they know nothing. So that when you come to say, is this recent creation, relatively recent creation, this court, an attempt to save an earlier reputation, there may be very little connection between the people making the decision now and the people who made the earlier decisions. And I think this point is often underappreciated. If there was an original objective, has it been fully understood by the next generation of diplomats, civil servants, and so on? Or have they just accepted an earlier decision and gone on to put it into effect? And without giving anything away that I shouldn't, I had a conversation only a few days ago with a comparatively senior diplomat dealing with this court and explaining his support for the court and how his concern was about the employment of officials and lawyers at the court. And he knew nothing about the Marty report because he was a newcomer. It's not his fault. That's the way governments work. So I can't answer whether the objective of this court is to save the reputation of ULEX. I can say that there must be interest in and concern about the expenditure of a great deal of money on this court. And I hope that whoever is charged with the responsibility of spending our taxpayers' money, well, mine as long as we remain in Europe, so only another 5 weeks in light of Brexit, but never mind. I only hope that those who are in charge of spending our money recognize that this court would never have come into being without allegations of organ harvesting made against your leaders, and that those allegations may have fallen away altogether.
Kjo situatë ka nisur në 2011. Unë nuk e di pse njerëzit e Kosovës, udhëhecit, nuk ju kanë thirrur për spaku për t'ju konsultuar atëherë për se çfarë do të ishte mendimi i Geoffrey për një tribunal special. Sikur të ishit në vend të një udhëheci kosovar, do ta kishit pranuar presionin e Hillary Clinton dhe administratës Obama për të formuar tribunalin special. Po ju flas me këtë dije që keni, me këtë atitudë që keni, lëkura Geoffrey dhe dia Geoffrey në citizenship të Kosovarit, ose të një udhëheci kosovari, di që është hipotetike pyetja, e pandershme pak, dorë në zemër, pandershme pyetja, por megjithatë e kam shumë siklet gjykatën speciale, se është e konsideroj të pandershme ndaj popullit Kosovës. Ju, a do ta pranonit këtë?
Unfair, yes. Tempting, yes. But I'm not going to fall to the temptation, because if I were to fall to the temptation of saying I would or would not have yielded to the pressure, then maybe I would be seen as criticizing the decisions of those who did. Yours is a very small and a very new country, and I suspect that the pressures that can be applied politically are sometimes overwhelming, and it would be quite wrong for an outsider, particularly a mere lawyer, to say that what your politicians did or did not do was right or wrong, and I'm afraid I can't help you with that.
Unë e prita këtë përgjigje, por Atëherë do ju bëj një pyetje ndryshe. A mund të mbrohet, zoti Najs, dhe është pyetja e fundit, rrëfimi i luftës së Kosovës kundër rrëfimit të dikmarrjet? Pra arsye se megjithatë konsideroj që nëse rrëfimi i dikmarrjet fiton në çfarë do aspekti, qoftë edhe me presion politik, rrëfimi për luftën e Kosovës dhe çlirimin e saj merr dimension tjetër. Dhe është e rëndë që pas çlirimit ta kemi një rrëfim tjetër për luftën dhe një krenari që e kemi pas për çlirimin ta humbim në gjyq. A mund mbrohet lufta e Kosovës kundër rrëfimit të dikmarrjet? Është pyetja konkret.
And a very interesting one. Let me step aside and then come back to it in particular. The role, if any, of judicial processes in writing history is uncertain and controversial. The judges will always say, quite properly, we are not writing history. We're just making a finding. But of course, what they decide does affect the perception of history of those who become aware of it. In the same way as all the evidence in a trial, even an unfinished trial, becomes very important in the writing of the history of the parties involved. And indeed, there's a book on this subject written by Dr. Nevenka Tromp, who was the principal researcher at the Yugoslav Tribunal, which deals with this very fact. And there are other books as well.
Nevenka is here somewhere.
She's there, yeah. And you reach this position that if you have a conflict and it ends and there is no trial, then the writing of the history of that conflict is journalists, historians, propaganda sometimes, and all too often it is the victor who writes the history and gets away with that history being accepted. And you can look around the world and you can see the way failure to try people, for example, the Vietnam War, where America was never tried, nor were the Viet Cong, for criminal culpability. There was never an investigation apart from an informal one. You can see how the history of that clearly criminal trial on one or both sides is disappearing without the reinforcement of some kind of judicial judgment. And you contrast that with the images of the 20-odd leaders of the, well, Nazi leaders and others on trial at Nuremberg, which imprints forever on the memory of people a judicial judgment as well as other evidence about the history. So whether you have judicial processes or you don't is very important for the business of how the citizen regards her or his history, even when judges say we're not here to write history. Kosovo's history was pretty, I thought, satisfactorily left by the tribunal. The decisions in the Milutinovic case, for example, as well as the evidence in the Milosevic case and the other cases, left a great deal of evidence upon which reliance could be placed for those wishing to form a view. That's now been rather submerged by this small but potent allegation of organ harvesting, and by a tribunal that's keeping alive the question of the culpability of Kosovo Albanians adverse in their actions to Serbs, so it is said. Can you correct any misunderstandings of history that this tribunal, this court, may bring? First, if it becomes clear that the organ harvesting allegations are empty, and if that is acknowledged by the court, clearly, not with weasel words saying, oh, we have suspicions, we have rumors. No, we have no evidence, we are charging no one. That would go some way to clarifying the position. However, the continuation of the court for years is likely to do damage to your history of what happened. And my untutored, inexperienced in a sense, not inexperienced, but my untutored view would be that countries have to take responsibility for setting the best record they can. That's why Serbia has been so clever. It knew that the court could be dangerous to its history and has been determined from the beginning by what it did about evidence, by now, I believe, tribunals into Sarajevo and Srebrenica. It's had an eye from the beginning to the significance for its history of record-leaving events like trials. And Kosovo, if it wants an accurate record of events to be left, should recognize the risk of the tribunal and should take some steps to ensure that it is in charge of leaving its own record. How it does that and how it raises that in public awareness when your young people are probably bored with hearing of the history, why should they not be, is a difficult problem, and I'm afraid it's for you and not for me.
Geoffrey Nice, kjo ishte intervista. Faleminderit shumë, ishte kënaqësi t'ju kem këtu në këtë rrëfim të veçantë, ndoshta i rrallë për atë që do të ndodh, pak për atë që ka kaluar, por unë po mundohem me mbyll këtë intervistë me një rrëfim personal. Realisht, kur është ndërtuar rrëfimi për Tribunalin e Hagës dikur, ka qenë shumë e vështirë të gjesh politikanë shqiptar të cilët kanë dashur të përballen me Milošević. E di se sa vështirë ka qenë për këta njerëz, e sidomos për Geoffrey Nice, për të gjetur njerëz të përballes për një njeri që ka pas fuqinë e inteligjencës dhe me pyetësorin e tij ka bërë shumë telashe. Por mund të them edhe diçka që nuk ka mund ta bind ose s'kemi mund ta bind as zotin Rogova në fillim, as zotin Adnan Merovci, dhe kemi bërë një listë të veçantë prej 10 personave që të filloj me zotin Bakalli. Dhe këtë intervistë të fundit, ose këtë fund intervistës, ndoshta edhe për faktin që kemi detyruar zotin Bakalli të shkojë i pari dhe të përballet me Miloševićin, ndoshta mirë që t'ia kushtojmë atij për ballavaqimin e parë. Dhe ne të gjithë tjerët të cilët e kemi përpiluar atë listë, është unë jam njëri prej tyre, kemi bërë të pamundurin që ta fitojmë një betejë. Po shpresoj që gjykata speciale do të jetë një betejë tjetër që duhet ta fitojnë njerëzit dhe e vërteta. E vërteta dhe fakt. Geoffrey Nice do të punojë ose do të jetë në anën e atyre që kanë fakte se s'kan kryer krime. Ata që kanë kryer, le ta bajnë me shëndet. Mirupafshim.